Hey guys, it's Iconic, and it's been about a week since League starts, and after making quite a few upgrades since my last update video, I thought it was a good time to make another update video. And while I'm at it, I also plan on covering the new 12 minion high budget PoB that I made tailored for the Doriani Mercenary. The first thing I want to go over, and arguably the most important, is I finally made the swap to 12 minions, 12 Spectres to be specific. And I'm going to go over all the things I changed. Like, I basically changed instantly, but the most important pieces for this were beta buying point with +1 to max number of Spectres. That gave me 1 Spectre, but because of the Dark Monarch helmet, that became 2 because it doubles. And then I went for a chest piece. Now for the chest piece, it has a life roll, but the life roll is high enough to where I actually gain health instead of losing the mastery that gives you increased life when your chest doesn't have life. Now suffixes I crafted, but I got T1 chaos res, got very low regen, and just said I'm fine with the chaos res, so I just crafted dexterity. This is a temporary chest and will still be changed for the high budget, so that's why I'm not trying to invest any more currency than I have to into this chest piece. In the process of the swap, I also switched out my boots. I was using Bones of Ruler last update, and now I'm actually using a rare pair of boots, and I have some Eldritch implicit because why not? So we have regen per Jera Strange and we have Bone Offering. We also added, of course, Eldritch implicits to the chest and minion damage to the implicits to the gloves, in case you're wondering. If you're enjoying the content and you haven't already, do consider liking and subscribing as it helps a lot with the algorithm and with our 2025 goal of getting 2,000 subs, after which I will be doing a face reveal on stream and here on YouTube. In the process of switching though, you have to remember one line on beta buying points, which will give you more damage, and that is your Erase Spectres also gain Arcane Surge when you do. This means we needed to find a source of Arcane Surge, and that source is Sniper's Mark linked with a level 1 Arcane Surge. It has to stay level 1, so you do not need to actually spend a lot of mana to trigger it, because you just care about proccing Arcane Surge so your minions get Arcane Surge, and this is what it looks like. You can see this circle floating around them. And to do that, we have basically respect from using Eldritch Battery, because you have to spend mana to gain Arcane Surge. So we are no longer using Eldritch Battery, and without Eldritch Battery, we waste all those points going to this cluster. So we removed all of that, and instead we get the Leash Mastery over here, and we just get some extra crit reduction and some stats. Once you make this move, you also have to switch some auras around, so we actually do have mana to spend, and that is where you would follow the medium budget. And the auras we change around, where I think we dropped Tempest Shield, we dropped Vitality, and we're now running Flesh and Stone. Basically it's pretty much the same way it was in the medium budget. I'm just pointing out the fact that you need to do it. And while we're on the notes of passive trees, I think it's a meme at this point. I still have those 2 sockets open, but at this point I've kind of accepted defeat, that I'm not going to fill these with Ghastly Eye Jewels. So I'm more or less just saving up for unique jewels like Watcher's Eyes and Storm Shrouds and the like. Now, we've also changed our mercenary quite a bit. Firstly, we have a Dark Seer. Dark Seer applies Malediction, which increases the amount of damage the enemies take, and as well as reduces the amount of damage they deal. But it's only a 10% chance it happens when our mercenary hits, so keep that in mind. But that said, it is not mandatory. It's a very expensive item, and get it when you can afford it, but it's not pressing. Before this, just keep using whatever you're using for your weapon. Then for the helmet, we switched that as well. The only important stat here is it's Shaper Influence, and it makes nearby enemies take increased elemental damage. That's all you care about. Try to get life, try to get any non-lightning res if you can, but ultimately it's a very cheap helmet. I got this like 5C literally. We keep Dawnbreaker. Our amulets, we switched from Purple's Toe to this amulet so we could cap out at -200 even with Purity of Elements, because we're not ready to drop Purity of Elements. So with that in mind, we still need lucky lightning damage, and so I added a Perfect Spirit of Fortune as a Spectre. And I also just generally prefer the Perfect Spirit of Fortune's lightning lucky range, because it is quite significantly larger than the Purple's Toe, and with how unpredictable Wretched Defilers behavior is when they're in actual combat and how widespread they get, it is better to just have the larger aura. Eventually though, I plan to replace this amulet with what I have in the high budget, but we'll go over that at that point. Then Doriani, the rings are still quite bad, still like minus 60% lightning res. That's why I needed the amulet. Eventually, I will upgrade these and then we can swap the amulet again. The gloves, the big thing here is Unnerve on hits. Eventually, we're going to get Unnerve on hit from Awakened gems, but I do not have Awakened gems yet, so we have Unnerve on hits. And then boots, it just has res. Eventually, I should Eldritch implicit this with life regeneration rate. I probably will after this video, but keep that in mind. He already has a decent chunk of life regen, I think 8,400. So nothing great, it's by no means bad. And then we have Immortal Flesh with as high regen roll as possible and as low res as possible. So minus 25 is the priority, and then get as much regen as you can past that. Now, going over the high budget PoB, this is not going to be as extensive as the original video because the original video covers the nitty-gritty of the build. I will be going over the changes I made to the build in comparison to the original version because I feel like it'll be a waste of time to go over it the second time. So the first and biggest change we made is we got rid of the Wraith Lord and now we're using a Dark Monarch. Now with this comes a few things. We lose a minion level, which is fine. I think at this point we have more than enough minion levels, but we lose a bunch of Ghastly Eye Jewels, which could have been really nice for us because flat damage is always nice, as well as some extra flat life, etc. But as a result of making this switch, we do get 4 extra Spectres, so we really can't complain. And how do we get the 4 extra Spectres? We use the same tech we used on our character. We get beta buying points with +1 Spectres, and then we get a +1 Spectre chest. Now for the beta buying points, your priority here is just minion, it's just the life. You don't care about anything else really. Raise Spectre life, maybe go for ES, but ES doesn't matter regardless. Now for our +1 Spectre chest, we are going for an armor base. Armor would be ideal, but it has the least replayability among minion builds. So if you want to have a chest piece that you can potentially use in other builds, then you might want to consider an armor ES base. But otherwise, a pure armor base, armor EV, they're all fine to use with this setup. Now, the most important thing is you want to fracture a +1 to max number of Spectres on your best base, and then craft this with trying to get as high of a life roll as possible. With as high of a life roll as possible, the only thing else that matters is physical damage reduction. So you can either craft these suffixes first and prioritize physical damage reduction, or go for your prefixes first. Either way, you want to have that, and you want to also have a spare suffix so you can craft suppress to cap our spell suppress chance. We have also changed the aspect we are using because we are no longer using Sphaling, so aspect of the crab will be a lot less effective essentially. So we have switched to using an aspect of the spider for even more damage and some extra slows on the enemies. So this is going to be very comfortable, very nice DPS boost from the previous version. And then for the amulet, we are still going for an Unetal's Vow just because it is really nice. And the Chaos Res, Cold Res, you can find those in positives, would be really nice for your resistances. But as an alternative, you still can go Replica Dragonfang's Flight. It's up to you. Either way, you're going to be getting 3 levels from your amulet if you put in an power level 4 here. So doesn't matter too much. And also on favor of Replica Dragonfang's Flight, it does have reduced attribute requirements to reduce the amount of intelligence we have to get, even ever so slightly. So that is one advantage that Dragonfang's Flight has over the Unetal's Vow. We are no longer trying to get to -200 lightning res like we were before. So our rings have opened up to having a much better roll for minion damage and attack speed, and potentially any resistances or attributes you may need. But that said, the tree covers most of the attributes. I don't think we don't need dexterity anywhere. We also don't need strength anywhere. We just naturally have these attributes except ints. So that's why we're getting int on basically everything that can roll it. So int chest, int gloves, and int boots. Then we're going to go over the mercenary setup because this changed quite a bit. Now with this setup, of course, he has Doriani's prototype. So you're going to need minus res rings. But if you can get really good minus res rings, you do not need any other source of minus res. This can take your mercenary all the way from 0 lightning res to -200 pretty easily. But it will be expensive, so keep that in mind. And then you can reflect it if you so choose with your Calandra's Touch. But we're going for a Dark Seer for the same thing I said before. Malediction, which reduces damage they do and boosts our damage quite a bit. And then Matua to Puna. The reason we are going for this is we want to stack as much aura effect on him as possible, because he does benefit from aura effect because he's going to have our wrath and zealotry aura. So on to that front, we are using a Matua to Puna, and we are also using a Strangle Gasp. Only thing we care about here is having all the anoints. Now, all these anoints, it might not be obvious what they do, but they basically all either Whispers of Doom gives +1 max curse, but Sovereignty gives a lot of aura effect, Influence gives aura effect, and Leadership gives aura effect. We're trying to get as much aura effect as possible so he can have a stronger wrath and zealotry aura, which would increase our damage by quite a bit. Then we go for a Crown of the Tyrant. This gives us flat lightning per blue socket on the helmet. You can only have one socket. It's pretty good, pretty expensive right now, so keep that in mind. Gloves, the priority here is Calling Strike for the Warlord Influence. If you can get that alongside Enfeeble on hit, that is great. And then past that, you probably want to get max life or potentially increase life regenerate. All of these stats are things you can go. Just know the priority is Calling Strike and potentially Enfeeble on hit. If you do not get Curse on hit, then you actually do not want to anoint Whispers of Doom, and you can go for a cheaper anoint like Champions of the Cause, which is over here. Champion of the Cause, which also has increased effect of non-aura skills, non-curse aura skills rather. Then past that, we just want a Combs Binding to help convert 25% of physical damage for nearby enemies to fire damage, so it's easier to mitigate it for both the mercenary and for ourselves, giving both of us better survivability. Besides the mercenary, we've also changed some things we're using. For example, we're now using a Megalomaniac, and the priority here is to get Enduring Composure, which is our source of endurance charges, as well as Dread March. We needed a source of endurance charges since we dropped the endurance charge generating mercenary. And with Dread March, we give our minions a bit more survivability from Fizz and Chaos Res. We also changed our support Spectres, and this is important. You always want to utilize my notes section because I try to keep this with information that is relevant. So we changed our support Spectres. We ended up dropping the Perfect Forest Warrior on this variant because we plan to get Calling Strike on the mercenary, and with him having Calling Strike, I didn't find that we needed the onslaught, or the onslaught was enough to justify losing the Wretched Defiler. So I went for this setup instead. So we have Defilers, we have Guardian Turtle. Guardian Turtle provides a Determination aura as well as PDR. Determination is good for our Watcher's Eye as a bonus if we can get that mod. If we can't, it's fine. Then we have a Perfect Blasphemer. Perfect Blasphemer has a really strong smite. A smite that's way stronger than anything the player can have. So this is a mandatory Spectre to have. And then Spirit of Fortune, because we are using Percos 2 anymore, to get to total of like our 12 minions. Then we also have our mercenary of choice, which is Fallen Reverend. The Fallen Reverend being the one I'm using, it can roll a Wrath and Zealotry aura. If you do not get these two combinations and you had to pick, I would pick Wrath and then run Zealotry yourself. And then eventually you will find the Wrath and Zealotry aura guy and then run that. But if you haven't found a Fallen Reverend at this point in the game, that is rough. But we can also use a War Priest because he can come with smites, as well as a Consecrated Path that has a support gem that gives allies on it increased damage. That said, he's not nearly as good as a Fallen Reverend, so we still want to get Fallen Reverend eventually. And then if you're a very defensive player, maybe a hardcore player or something, the Striker is a good choice because he can provide fortification with Vigilant Strike, as well as endurance charges with Enduring Cry. And if he gives you endurance charges, then Enduring Composure is not as important, but I would still go it personally. And then this is just what I told you about Enduring Composure, the priorities and whatnot. On that note, I actually just realized I forgot to mention it. So for the third node, you want to get something that is synergistic. So I chose block here. You can go block AD, block at spell damage. There's a node that gives both. You can go for things that buff your minions. There's a lot of things you can choose from. That is what you want for a third node. Now, we also have configs here for our mercenary. His Wrath aura and Zealotry are just as good as ours. I haven't added the config that gives him all the aura effect we are boosting with our choice of gear, but I did change the reservation so we actually get accurate reservation efficiency for our character. So for that, we just did this, so it doesn't cost. So it's still there, it's being taken into account, but it doesn't actually affect our character's mana reservation because it's on a mercenary. Now we are still deciding to convert all our damage to cold and chaos, simply because it makes it very easy to be defensive. Very easy. because now we have 90% max stress for chaos and 85 for 90% for cold, 85 for chaos, and we're still able to stack on suppress as well as have a pretty decent amount of damage coming from all our boosting and Doriani. So if, and this is unlikely, but if mercenaries were to be nerfed to the point where Doriani was not usable on them, we would be in an excellent swap to just, a position to just take the chest, put it on ourselves, and change what we need from our mercenary. And just in case you missed the original video, the way we convert 100% of elemental to cold and chaos is divine flesh takes 50% of that. 20% comes from our Watcher's Eye, which has a 20% conversion of fire and lightning to cold, as well as a sublime vision that converts the remaining 30% of fire and lightning to cold while affected by purity of ice. And then of course we're using purity of ice. Our curse is our source of arcane sword. Like I said, you want a level 1, nothing more, and everything else about stays the same. Oh, and before I forget, I have been playing around with chain support in game, and it feels really nice to have chain, like really nice. I think it's a matter of preference if you prefer pierce or chain. I personally prefer chain, but do note that it comes with a less damage modifier, whereas pierce comes with a more damage multiplier. So you are dropping single target damage for using chain, and you can of course always swap it out for something that has more DPS like slow approach. I'm not much of a gem swapper myself, so I typically just boss with chain. All the clips you see have chain supports for the bossing, and that about covers the high budget PoB. For upgrades, I'm considering my character, I'm just going to be slowly transitioning into that. So I'll be thinking of things like Storm Shroud, so I can actually become ailment immune without purity of element, and maybe drop that so I can then change my amulet on my mercenary. That is the consideration. But even more pressing is getting to level 30 Spectres. I think that is going to be a very big damage boost. Then we also have the fact that I can actually get a 12 passive cluster, so I will be working towards that. Even without the conversion, it's worth getting 12 passive cluster. Just keep in mind, ideally you want to have a very good life pool before you drop the life masteries, because that is a very big source of our current 6k life pool, and you don't want to miss out on that. Overall, the build is performing really well. I am very tanky. I literally do not die in the entire stream where I completed all my Maven invitations. The only point I died was against Adsiri, because she has like insane fire pen and flame blast is that strong. But other than that, I didn't die throughout my stream, and I tried to eat some pretty nasty shit. As usual, I'll be going live around when this video gets released. So feel free to stop by and see the build progress live, or ask any questions that you might have. If you made it this far, do consider liking and subscribing, as that helps out a lot. And with all that said, thank you for watching.